Thank you. Great introduction. For a minute there, I was wondering who he was talking about. Okay. We're asking a question. Does a fish see water? It's a modern koan. Koans are questions that are theoretically unanswerable. They all have an answer. But when in a Zen monastery, when a koan is given, no matter what answer you come up with, the master says, no, go back and try again. Doesn't matter whether you were right the first time. It doesn't matter if you were wrong 100 times. It's always come back tomorrow. Answer the question. Does a fish see water? What does it matter? I'm not a fish. Why do I care whether a fish sees water or not? Does it really matter? Well, the answer is, of course, both yes and no. A fish does see water if you grant that there is a fish and water to be seen. Ultimately, however, there is no fish, there is no water. Ultimately. We'll explain that as time goes on, I hope. Anyway, so this is a modern koan. It's right up there with what is the sound of one hand clapping? Does a dog have Buddha nature? If a man is alone in the forest and his wife's not around when he speaks, is he still wrong? Of course he is. Okay, so I am Sensei Mui, and we're at the Theosophical Society in America. Today is January 26, 2017, and lots of interesting things are happening in the United States at this time. So these are fish. Fish live in a reality of water. Cool reality. We live in a reality of air. Does a fish see water? Neurologically, yes they do, I'm told. Do we see air? No, we see the results of air, what air does. Wind, pollution, smoke from fires, things of this nature. Fog. We see the results of that. The question becomes important to us as a koan, as a reference point when we think about the mind. What is it actually that we see? What is it that we actually hear, or touch, or taste, or smell, or conceive of? That's what we'll be talking about. Reality in a nutshell. Nothing exists the way we think of it. And at the same time, no thing exists outside of the way we think about it. This represents two different realities in which we live. One is used to be called the ultimate reality. Today we call it the unconditioned reality. And the other represents conditional reality, what we used to call convention. Let's define our terms. The holographic mind, also called the holonomic brain theory, was the brainchild of a guy named Karl Pribram. He brought out this idea in 1969, and what he said was that the mind probably operates in a holographic manner. Memory in the brain operates the same way that a hologram operates. Our ability to recognize familiar objects is similar to the same kind of recognition one finds in a hologram. We have, and what he's trying to say at that point is, our ability to recognize familiar objects is similar to recognition in holography, where you have a reference point, a beam of light which acts as a reference point, and then you have its reflection. Together they create a three-dimensional image on a two-dimensional space. Question, just for your own pondering, if you were living in a two-dimensional space, would you know it? Would it seem unusual? In Buddhism, we postulate 6 realms: heaven, Titan, human, hungry ghost, animal, and hell realms. If you died today and you woke up in a hell realm, would you know you were in hell? No, that would be home. Home just has certain characteristics, just like our reality has certain characteristics. Can a person be happy in hell? I don't know. Are you happy here? Where are you living? The interference holography explains our ability to perceive difference in an object that has changed. In Buddhism, we have these things called the skandhas, or khandhas in Pali. And they are the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental fabrication, sometimes called intention, sometimes called conception, and consciousness. And these 5 things, of these 5 things, only one form is physical. The rest, feeling, perception, mental fabrication, and consciousness, are all mental events. Now, an interesting fact that neuroscientists have come up with, neuroscience has learned more in the past 5 years than they had in previous 5,000 years. And they've come up with some pretty phenomenal stuff. Your brain picks up about 60 trillion bits of data every second. It takes care of, you ready for this one? 60 times 10 to the 21. That's a lot of zeros. Number of body functions in a second. How many of those are you aware of? Are you aware of your breath? Not if you're not thinking about it, or if you're not breathing. Then you become aware of it very quickly. Are you aware of everything you hear? Well, neuroscience also tells us that out of every 400,000 bits of information, you're only picking up on 2,000 of them. That's 0.5%. 0.5% of your experience is physical. That means that 99.5% is conceptual. Conception, by definition, is symbolic. If you conceive of something, it is not the something that you're conceiving of. It's like language. If I say cat, cat represents a 4-legged adorable feline, but it is not the 4-legged adorable feline itself. I could call my cat a refrigerator. If we all agreed that that's what we're going to call a 4-legged adorable feline, that refrigerator is as good a word as any. It's like my name, Sensei Mui. It's spelled Sensei Mui, but it's pronounced Hermione Gilgold. We can make it do anything we want. A word is just a sound. It has no meaning until we give it a meaning. Conceptions are ways in which we measure things, categorize things, put them in little boxes so we know what we're all talking about. That's a conception. That's 99.5% of our experience. We're experiencing something that does not in itself exist. Cool beans. Anyway, around 1972, it was implied by the science at the time that the individual's ability to create holographic images in the brain meant that they were accessing more of their brain. The better the memory, the more access to the brain, because memories are holographic. We had an experience, now we have a memory. The memory is the reflection of the reference point, the experience. All memories are basically untrue, because what they are abstractions of what actually happened. Because they're abstractions, they're missing parts. And because they are abstractions, we get to add parts to it that may or may not have happened. My wife and I talk about what happened yesterday, last month, last year, 10 years ago. We talk about our experiences all the time. It's like we're living on 2 different planets. She remembers it one way, I remember it another way. Got to wonder what planet she's from. Of course, she wonders the same about me. All right. The greater the access to the brain, the greater the consciousness, the more functional it is. If you have a walnut-sized consciousness, when you read a book, you will have a walnut-sized understanding. When you look out your window, you'll have a walnut-sized awareness of what you're experiencing. If you wake up in the morning, you wake up with a walnut-sized awakenedness. If you expand your consciousness through meditation and other techniques, you get a more expansive understanding when you read the book. You get a more expansive understanding or awareness when you look out the window. You have a more expansive awakenedness when you get up in the morning. The more expansive your consciousness, the more of your brain you're using. The more your mind is able to access reality as it is, not as you conceive of it, not as you hope it would be, but as it really is. And that makes a big difference in how happy you're going to be with your life. In Pure Land Buddhism, they have an expression, great expression. It's all a delusion anyway. So let's create a better delusion. Something that's happier, something that's more skillful, something that's more beneficial. So they use the symbolism of Amitabha Buddha. Amitabha, immeasurable light, immeasurable life. He's a personification of dependent origination. So what is it that a Pure Lander is worshiping, is devoted to? The process of existence itself. Dependent origination, dependent co-arising. Until I am conscious of you, I can't be conscious of me. As soon as I am conscious of you, I have created a me. Mui is conscious of Bonnie, right there. That's her name. As soon as I see her, I am conscious not only of seeing Bonnie, but I'm also conscious of me seeing Bonnie. So I create a me that sees Bonnie. It's not the same me that nicked himself shaving this morning. It's not the same me that put on a light pair of socks and a dark outfit. It's not the same me that pet my cat. Because all of these are different reflections of the me I have created. More about that Saturday. So what are holograms? As I said earlier, they're three-dimensional images projected onto space with the aid of a laser light that is photons. Any wave can create a hologram. And a hologram is vital to the creation of virtual reality. And here you have this, well, she's attractive from the nose down, lady wearing a virtual reality pair of goggles, which makes her kind of unattractive in a relativistic sort of a way. Who needs them? We're creating a virtual reality with every waking moment. If 99.5% of our worldly experience is conceptual, then it's all virtual, isn't it? Because concepts have no real existence. You can't touch a concept. Your five senses cannot touch them. Only your sixth sense, the mind, can. So what is the significance of using the hologram? Well, one distinguishing characteristic of a hologram is to create that virtual image. A virtual image is a three-dimensional extension in space that appears to exist yet has no substance. We generally believe that we are able to clearly distinguish between external and internal events. Well, that boundary between external and internal events is kind of blurred. Because on a day-to-day level, we really don't know what it is we're experiencing to its fullest. We only know that we're having an experience and we're defining it in a certain way, based upon what we have learned, how we have been conditioned. The world out there and the world in here are not only always clearly delineated, each brain cell, individual cortex responds to a specific pattern. There is no color in nature, by the way. There are no sounds in nature. In nature, on its most fundamental level, it's all frequency. You see certain frequencies, they enter your brain says, oh, that's blue, that's green, that's yellow, there's a red one over there. And it puts it together in a certain way. Then that way is projected back out into space. Really bizarre stuff happening here. We think we're seeing a red bird that we're going to call a cardinal. What we're really seeing are frequencies. When that red bird called a cardinal chirps, we're hearing sonic waves. If we were to touch the feathers of that red bird, we are touching pure energy that we are interpreting as mass. Because in reality, quantum physics tells us there's not even mass. That too is an illusion. So our brain waves, our brain picks up some of these waves, interprets them as vertical lines, horizontal lines, curved lines. It uses a particular kind of mathematics built in to our organism called Fourier mathematical functions. This can all be, we can be verified, mapped out mathematically. Fourier analysis is used to explain how we perceive through sight and hearing and smell. And eventually they'll get it down to taste and touch as well, showing that there's a mechanical process going on in our brain. Mechanical, not necessarily organic. Holograms are not necessarily created by light. As I said, they can be any wave function. The brain's past experiences serve as a reference beam. I'm getting all the science now out of the way so we can talk about the juicy stuff. Okay. New information is combined with the experiences, memories of the past to create an interference pattern. The interference pattern becomes part of the reference beam and learning has occurred. We get stuff we only can learn, or we can only experience in the past tense. It takes time for me to touch that and feel it. It's only a fraction of a second, but it still takes time. I am feeling this in the past tense. It takes a certain amount of time for light reflecting off of your bodies to reach my eyes. That takes time. When you speak and I hear you, it takes time for the sound to come from your mouth into my ears. When I taste, it takes a certain amount of time for the taste to be recognized by my brain. Same is true with smell. I'm always experiencing in the past tense. So what I think is the ever-present now, if I'm thinking about it, it's happening slightly past. My virtual reality is a fraction of a second after the experience itself. Well, with each new piece of information that comes in, that arrives at the brain, new interference patterns are created, becoming the reference background for the next experience. This is a hologram. reference beam, reflection. In Buddhism, we call that karma. That's how karma works. Thanissaro Bhikkhu, a brilliant thinker in the Theravada tradition, in a book called Wings to Awakening, explains this whole process as a hologram. He worked on that manuscript in 1979. Guy way ahead of his time. Okay, so what this means is that our reality is constantly shifting interference patterns, interfering with our reference points. Reality is constantly shifting. It's unstable. It's never the same, one moment to the next. Gentleman over here pulled his ear. Another over here pulling his ear on the other side. Reality shifted just for a second. And one of the cool practices that I was taught early on was just watch the change. What changes? So the question becomes in the practice, what now? What is it now? What now? What now? And just noticing changes, change after change after change. Noticing the instability of the reality I think I'm experiencing. Ta-da, we're back to karma. Okay, this holographic model raises some really interesting questions. If all this is true, and it's a reflection, it's an interference pattern of some kind, that things are happening, that we're noticing things in such a way where certain points of awareness, certain bits of information coming into our brain are canceling out other bits of information, and we're only getting 0.5% of this experience physically. What is it that we are actually perceiving? Well, both quantum physics and the holographic brain theory would tell us that we're actually perceiving illusions. Illusions have a genius to them. They too are not what they represent. They too are symbols. Illusions have their own reality, their own set of rules. And in early Buddhism, we call that convention, as opposed to what used to be called ultimate reality in English, Paramatta Satya. We don't call it ultimate anymore because that would make it ultimate compared to what? And how do you know if you reach the ultimate reality or not? It's like asking the question, how would you know if you were a Buddha? If you were enlightened? You wouldn't, because that would be your natural state. Other people might recognize it, but to you it would be quite natural. If we are perceiving interference patterns, what is it that we're perceiving? A hologram consists of both reflected and reference being. What is the nature of the thing being reflected? If all we're seeing is the reflection, what is it that we're reflecting? And what is it that the brain is actually referencing? What is the brain's equivalent to a reference beam? What does the brain both reference reality and reflect it at the same time? These questions have never been answered, especially this last one. What is reality? Well, quantum physics tells us that quanta, a discrete quantity of energy, is the basic unit of reality. Sometimes in popular literature it's referred to as electrons. In technical literature, not. It can manifest either as a particle or a wave. When not directly observed, electrons exist as a wave when left to their own devices, but as soon as we try to measure them, they turn into particles. Is the electron that was a wave now different than the electron that is a particle? Is the experience that I'm having when I remember it the same as the experience I had when I thought I had it? Well, this indicates that there are two coexistent realities. A conditioned reality, a phenomena that exists only in relationship to phenomena, a relativistic sort of existence. It is conventional, it is measurable, it is available to the 5 physical senses, and it is conceptual. Therefore, it is available to the 6th sense. And then there's the unconditioned reality, which exists prior to the manifestation of phenomena. It is called ultimate, it is immeasurable, it transcends the 6 senses. It goes way beyond what it is that we can pick up. Because we're not physically able to pick up that kind of a reality. We're just not wired that way. But it can be accessed. There are all kinds of meditation techniques available to access it. My personal favorite is jhana practice, aka dhyana, chan, zen, shina in Tibetan, dzogchen, mahamudra. Okay, then there is the entanglement problem, and this one threw Einstein for a loop. Because Einstein said, Herr Albert, that nothing moves faster than the speed of light. And if you have one electron over here and another electron way over on the other side of the universe, and one spinning clockwise, the other one spins clockwise. If you stop this one and make it spin counterclockwise, the other one spins counterclockwise. And it does so immediately. What you do to one happens to the other immediately. It would take hundreds of thousands of years for light to get from this point to this point. How come it happened immediately? Einstein couldn't accept that. Well, Niels Bohr, another great quantum physicist, said, Albert, you're wrong. You're not looking at 2 different electrons. You're looking at the same electron. You're just seeing them in 2 different places. Bohm, another great quantum physicist, explained it this way. If you're locked in a room, and in this room, there are 2 TV monitors, and you see these 2 goldfish on these monitors. There's monitor A has a goldfish, monitor B has a goldfish. And suddenly, after a couple of hours of watching them, you notice the 2 goldfish are like moving in unison. This one turns this way, the other one turns this way. This one goes up, the other one goes up, and it's happening immediately. Are they communicating telepathically? Is there some sort of magic involved? What? Well, okay, somebody says, it's 12 o'clock, gotta go feed the fish. Okay, so you grab your little can of fish food, you run down there to the goldfish, you see the goldfish tank, and you notice, there's camera A for monitor A, there's camera B for monitor B, and they're pointing at the tank this way. Then when you go to feed the 2 fish, you notice there's only 1 fish. You've been watching the same fish from 2 different perspectives. That's how they explain this quantum entanglement. Electrons, it's like as if there's only 1 electron in the entire universe, but we're seeing it from 100 bazillion different angles. So it appears to be that there are many different electrons. What application does that have to day-to-day life? Aren't you made of electrons? Don't you have quanta in your body? Well, if there's only 1 electron in the universe, or appears to be only 1 electron in the universe, that would mean that we're like all the same entity. There's another saying in Pure Land Buddhism. There's only 1 mind, and we're all using it. Okay. All right, so quantum theory proved to be incredibly successful, became widely accepted, and this means with Bohm's fish, with Bohr's explanation, time and space are illusory. They do not exist the way we think of them. They do not exist the way we perceive them. It's all done with smoke and mirrors, and there's the fish. Ta-da! So in 1987, Bohm gave us this fish theory. Our brains operate as a holographic frequency analyzer, decoding projections from a more fundamental dimension. Time and space are constructs. You and I are constructs. The fact is, you will never know another human being. You will never know another object. You will only know what you think about that human being and that object, because 99.5% of our experience is conceptual. If you really want to get to know the other person, stop the conceiving. Truly experience without conception. World becomes much more interesting. And it also shows that nothing exists outside of the way we think of it. No thing exists the way we think of them. This is old news. Now, if you noticed, all the way up to now, they've been talking about brain. This reflects a 250-year-old bias regarding Newtonian physics, materiality. Everything is a mechanical function. Sometime back in the past, God had created a watch, it worked, and then he went on vacation. And we've been running around working as a machine ever since. Suddenly comes quantum physics and the latest neuroscience, and we find this ain't so. We find that things are not localized as we think they are. That everything is fragmented in a little cubbyhole kind of fashion. Well, again, this is old news. About 2,500 years ago, suttas and sutras were written that explained this idea of a more or less a unified field of experience. Then came the Abhidhamma, explaining the same stuff that we just spoke about, which goes all the way back to 1880, I guess. The Abhidharma came later. There were two different versions of the same ideas. Then came the middle way school called Madhyamaka, and then came Yogacara, which explained how all of this works. This explained why it worked. This explained how it worked. Then came Carl Gustav Jung, who applied this to psychology, where he talked about archetypes. Archetypes are dreams, myths, hallucinations, religious symbols that are shared by many people and cultures. They're universal. These archetypes represent part of a collective unconsciousness derived from 2-million-year-old collective history. Jung and Pauli, 1955. Only a limited glimpse of the implication of the implicate order is available to us because we lack knowledge to perceive or decode the frequency interference patterns that arise in our brain. We're back to the holographic mind. It was believed that dreams may be one way that we counteract our tendency to fragment reality. Of course, it's true that a dream might just be a dream. Some dreams seem to be more important than others. Some dreams seem to be really bizarre, some are really orderly. But each one is important. They still tell us about us as individuals. Well, in the Yogacara school, there are said to be 8 levels of consciousness. That number 8 is based on a misunderstanding of what the originator, Vasambandhu of the Yogacara school, actually said. Come to that in just a minute. Anyway, the traditional 6 consciousnesses are visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, tactile, and the mental conceptual consciousness. Each one has a base, each one sees an object or has an object. Yogacara went further and said there are 7th, 8th consciousnesses, but they're not actually separate from these 6, but they represent transformation states. These transformation states are manas, self-consciousness, and the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness. Then this is where the idea of the collective unconsciousness arises, the Jungian idea. So let's start with the alaya vijnana. It is the normal flow of the stream of consciousness. It is interrupted by the appearance of a reflected self-awareness. It is just what it is. It sees just what is there. It hears just what is produced. It's unbroken. The Buddha called this the life process. It is also a cognitive process in that there is recognition. It is pure awareness without a subject or object dichotomy. In our language, in most languages, but ours in particular, the Indo-European languages, we like to posit a subject, a verb, and an object. I am standing. Am standing is the verb. I am standing here. Here would be the object, the I, the subject. In the alaya vijnana, this storehouse consciousness, there is no I. There is no here. There is no standing. And there's certainly not an am. It's all one. It's one experience. A little example of that would be, I'm standing here holding a Swiss watch. It's a Swiss Army watch, actually. I am standing here holding this. If I were not standing here holding this, it would be a totally different experience. But since I am standing here holding this, how can you take yourself out of the experience and become an observer? The observer is being created by a concept. There is merely the observing of something, a something which has been conceived of. If you try to divorce yourself from the experience you're having, the experience is no longer valid because your experience is existing in an impossible way. You're part of the experience. That means you, the experience, and what you are experiencing are all one entity. It's not 3 different entities. Okay, these 2 transformations, manana, the manas, self-consciousness or self-view, self-confusion, self-esteem, self-love. It's thinking about the various perceptions occurring in the stream of consciousness. And it is defiled by self-interest. It's interesting that the only time the word evil is ever used in the canon, both Pali and Sanskrit, the word evil is always applied to the self-view. There's a moral dimension to it. It is immoral to support self-interest. Of course, it appears more often in English than in Pali and Sanskrit, because in Pali and Sanskrit, the word evil isn't there. But a word that translates as evil is there. All right, the Visaya Vijnapati, or Napti, is the concept of the object. So in these transformations, mana and Visaya Vijnapti is the creation of a self and the creation of an object. It generates grasping after a real object even when it is no more than a concept that combines experience and reflection, reference and reflection. And it's based upon past karma. It's based upon what we have experienced before. When we talk about a hologram, when we take a hologram, an image, then you can try this at home, no problem. Get yourself a holographic picture, cut it into 100 little pieces, pick up one piece and look at it with a magnifying glass. What do you see? You see the entirety. Because when you fragment a hologram, the entirety is contained in every little piece of it. The smaller the piece, the fuzzier the image. The same is true with human life. Again, if you have a walnut-sized consciousness, you get a very, very fuzzy picture. The more you expand your consciousness, the clearer the picture becomes. This is the path to enlightenment, getting a clearer and clearer picture, or one of the effects of the path of enlightenment. So, the formation of the world as produced through the 5 aggregates is driven by our karma, our experiences. How we view things, our intention, what it is we are grasping at, what it is we reverse to. This is the 4th aggregate called mental formation or mental fabrication, because it's a creative process. The formation of the world fabricated by consciousness in quantum physics is unification and individuated. The world we create in our human consciousness is extraordinarily fragmented. There are 3 natures of perception. The parikalpita literally means the fully conceptualized reality, that nature. Imaginary nature, things incorrectly comprehended based upon conceptual construction through attachment and erroneous discrimination. This is the level of the ordinary being. This is our day-to-day life. This is how we live in an imaginary world. The paritantra, literally other dependent, is dependent nature by which the correct understanding of the world is that the world is dependently originated in nature of things, and nature of things is understood. Then the parinispana, literally fully accomplished, recognizes the absolute nature, sees the unified field of existence, which is also called dharmakaya or suchness or the body of reality in Buddhism and sometimes in the Vedas. In quantum physics, it's called the unified or superstring theory. And one comprehends things as they are in and of themselves, which is much different than the conceptualization we experience things through. It is uninfluenced by any conceptualization at all. And in the literature, this is described as an arhat, a fully enlightened being that's still living and breathing and eating. Emptiness falls into this. Suchness is another word for emptiness. Dharmakaya is another word for emptiness. It's the absence of duality between perceiving subject and the perceived object. There's more to it. This is the Yogacara presentation, so they kind of abbreviated it, because this is what was important to them. The absence of subject and object. Shunyata is what it's, how it's pronounced in both the Pali and the Sanskrit. The spelling's just a little bit different. Is essentially a Buddhist concept of a fundamental, non-substantial, empty ground of potentiality. This is, again, the unified field theory that Einstein was so hot to find. That Brian Greene, the physicist that first put forth the string theory, was trying to explain. Emptiness. There's even a department of non-duality and emptiness at Stanford University now. MIT has a department that deals with the science of emptiness. And it doesn't mean nothing, because nothing is a thing. It means the inclusion of everything before it arises in our fragmented experience. And because of emptiness, things give rise to a multitudinous production of dualistic experience through the operational of an internal primordial activity of cognition. Cognition creates things. In quantum physics, nothing exists until somebody is conscious of it. The universe exists, therefore consciousness must be aware of it. Whose consciousness? God? Brahma? How's about every sentient being in the universe? There's only one mind, we're all using it. The universe starts empty, but potentiality with a huge, has potentiality with a huge amount of information on it. These quanta are simply bits and pieces of information. Quantum physics is all about information. Every bit of data that we receive in our brain is a bit of information. It can be coded, it can be mathematically explained. That's all it is, bits of information. It comes into the brain, it's organized, projected back out, and then the mind, which apparently is not local. The mind doesn't exist in the brain. Neuroscientists can't find it. They've come to the conclusion that it's non-local. It exists everywhere at one time, past, present, and future. We are mind. But because of the way the manas works, we conceptualize ourselves as being separate from that mind. Maybe it's greed. I want a mind of my own. I'm not happy with yours. Certainly not happy with the one we got last month. Yogacara and quantum physics. In Yogacara, it is said, all these various appearances do not exist as sensory objects which are other than consciousness. Their arising is like the experience of self-knowledge. All appearance from indivisible particles to vast forms are mind. Consciousness creates stuff. That's Yogacara, about 450 CE. Quantum physics, ta-da, today. Mind has erected the objective outside world out of its own stuff. Schrödinger. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of consciousness and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Great series of movies. We now have to face the possibility that there is nothing inherently real about the properties of an object that we measure. In other words, measuring those properties is what brings them into existence. I see, therefore you are. If I don't see you, if I don't think about you, you don't exist in my reality. Somebody else I wish I could do that to. Close my eyes and he's gone. Things exist because we are aware of them. This is quantum physics. This is also Yogacara Buddhism. This is also the Vedas. This is also the Upanishads. This is the Tao, when we come right down to it. Teachings found in all of these schools. Consciousness brings together forms. There is no matter. There are only forms. Forms that are composed of energy of various densities. I'm a fairly dense bit of energy. A 200-pound piece of lead is a more dense bit of energy. A kid in the third grade is a less dense bit of energy, but we're all energy. So the quantum theory and Yogacara both agree that the universe is actually a vast cosmic dream created by its inhabitants. You don't need an outside agency. We do it ourselves. Quantum physics shows that we're all involved in or participate in the existence of the universe. No phenomenon is a phenomenon until it is observed phenomena. Then Asanga, co-founder of the Yogacara school of Buddhism, says, phenomena as they appear and resound are neither established or real in these ways, since they keep changing in all possible and various manners, just like the appearances of magical illusions. Magical illusions also are not what they appear to be. Ohm equal mc squared. That's all quantum physics is telling us. Any questions?
Hi, thank you for the talk.
Sure.
So I'll try to make some sense out of this question. So when you talk about an unconditioned reality, would someone that was born blind, deaf, would they have a more heightened truth than somebody that has a conditioned reality? Because they don't have the impact of those experiences?
No, they wouldn't. Not necessarily so. They would be deprived of certain bits of information that we bring in through our senses. But that doesn't stop the conceptualization. It is possible that they would have heightened senses, and it's also possible that they would have a heightened awareness, but it's not necessarily so. And that's the thing, does one thing automatically mean something else? In that particular case, no. In that case, it would probably be easier for a person deprived of one or two of their senses to attain higher state of awareness, but it's not necessitated because karma plays such a huge, phenomenal role. If you you go to the store, you get a can of vegetable beef soup. You put it in a pot and you pour in your water. Now, every one of those bits of pieces in that soup is a fascicle, a karmic seed, say. And we're going to use this as an analogy. They're all karmic seeds. So you turn on the water and it starts to boil and it's churning. And then you see one piece come up. Oh, there's a carrot. There's a noodle. Whoa, there's that meat they were talking about. And as it boils, different things raise to the surface. The convection current brings some stuff up, drags some stuff down. That's how our karma works. At one given moment, something from my past experience will become dominant. At other times, it'll become dormant and something else will become dominant. I had an experience yesterday where something from when I was 5 years old appeared in my present, karma. Since I was aware of it, I had to make the decision that I want my life to be run by a 5-year-old or not. Well, in that case, no. So another bit of karma came in and drove me in that direction. Karma is a weird thing because it's like this fantastic tidal wave that just drives you forward if you're not aware of it. Once you become aware of it, then it's much easier to deal with. Life's still a little painful, but you don't keep repeating the same patterns and mistakes that you used to. You kind of formulate a whole new pattern of mistakes. Uh-huh.
Let's say you have a human who is born and has no sensory input whatsoever. No sight, no hearing, cannot smell, cannot taste, cannot touch. No sensory input whatsoever. Now you keep this person alive for so many years. So after those so many years, does this person actually have a memory of anything or a thought in their head?
Okay. What if questions are the best on account of I'm not going to be wrong? Anything I say, yeah, okay. If a person is born without any kind of sensory, use of sensory organs, they've lost like all 6 of them, or do they still have mind?
Well, let's say they have a brain.
They have a brain. Is the brain functioning?
Well, let's assume it is because they're living.
Okay, so the brain is functioning. If a person, no matter what the circumstances are, if they have the ability to cognize, that is, conceptualize, recognize things, even if it's only a conception, yeah, they'll still have karma. They'll still have to deal with a conceptualized universe. It's just that their universe will look very, very different than anybody else's. But it will be a conceptualized universe. They have no choice. They have no sensory input to use. So it's a 100% conceptualized universe. The reality works such that we think that reality should be the same for everybody. Not so. Reality is highly individualized. They may be similar, but every reality is unique to the person experiencing it. This is why when we work with other people, we talk to other people, we listen to other people, we have to listen as closely as possible from their perspective and not necessarily demand that they adhere to our conception of reality. Because their conception of reality may not fit in our world, just as ours may not fit in their world. And we're seeing this act out now on the national and international stage, where there's a whole different reality going on with one part of the public than there is with the other part of the public. Who's to say which one's right? I only know which ones I agree with and don't agree with. If I say something is right or wrong, then I'm moralizing. And what does good and evil really mean, or good and bad really mean? Good means I liked it, bad and evil mean I didn't. That's all that really means. So when reality is so individualized and unique to the perceiver, then a whole different, it's a whole different ballgame. It's still all conceptual, or mainly conceptual. And that's what we're dealing with in our day-to-day life, is the conceptions that we have. We're not dealing with reality, most of us. Of course, tell a person about to be evicted from their home that their mortgage is not real, that the bills that you have to pay aren't real, and you're going to have a lot of upset creditors. If you have a broken leg, is the pain real? Well, yeah, if I'm experiencing, it's real, at least to me. Did that answer your question?
So I think what you're saying is if you have a brain, then the brain will invent something.
The mind will invent something. Mind and brain are not, possibly not, they coexist. They're reliant upon one another, but they're not exactly the same thing. Consciousness and mind cannot be located in the brain. This is the problem neuroscientists have today. Some are saying the brain is located somewhere, or the mind is located somewhere, consciousness is located somewhere. Some say in the brain, some say it's the entirety of the body, and 50% of neuroscientists today are saying it's non-localized. Consciousness does not reside within the being. Consciousness has created the being that is having the experience, which is really hard for our culture to fathom, since we're so hung up on Newtonian-type science, where there are these inviolable laws that cannot be transgressed because it's all very mechanistic, based upon materialism. Whereas neuroscience and quantum physics are saying, that ain't so. There is no material, so there cannot legitimately be materialism. And consciousness is not located in the brain or reside in the body. It's a much bigger thing than we can imagine.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Oh, thank you for showing up.
So, 2 questions.
Uh-huh.
The first, do animals have karma? And the second is, can you explain karma as you see it, maybe from a scientific perspective, or give a scientific rendering of your view of karma?
Okay, do animals have karma and a scientific perspective of karma? You got another couple of hours? Basically, do animals have karma? It depends on how you define karma. I hate to sound like Bill Clinton, but it depends on how you define is. Do animals have karma? A lot of old school Dharma teachers will say no. Animals do not have karma because you have to have the ability to make rational judgments. And animals do not appear to make rational judgments. A lot of new school Buddhists would say, oh, hell yeah. Sure they have karma. Because karma is basically cause and effect. And in the when the Buddha speaks of karma, he's talking about, very, very often, he seems to be talking about a psychological process of cause and effect. So if I discover that I like blue cheese, for instance, which I do, and bacon, I love bacon. If my karma is to be greedy and addicted toward bacon and blue cheese, I will go out of my way to find bacon and blue cheese, and I will make decisions based upon my greed for these two things. Cats do it. If that is how karma works for me, and I see my cats doing it, then they must have karma. It is not the same experience of karma that I have, but it's the same mechanism of karma. In some of the Mahayana schools, they'll go one step further, saying that, of course, animals participate in the mind stream, that life process, and that all living things eventually will become enlightened. That includes dogs, cats, spiders and snakes, trees and rocks. So in one sense, the answer is yes. There is karma, and it works universally. And then, on the other hand, karma is very localized at the same time. It's sort of like mind. There's a universality to it and a locality to it at the same time, depending upon which one we choose to invest ourselves in. The other question, scientifically, does karma work? Neuroscience says that karma works. It absolutely has to work. A psychological cause and effect. If we want to get into the idea of reincarnation and so forth, again, it's how do we define reincarnation? Buddhism is not a reincarnation religion. Not actually a religion at all when you come to think about it. But it's a lot about rebirth. I've been reborn 1,000 times today. Every time I have a change of mind, that's a rebirth. That's one way of defining it. So karma makes a lot of sense because karma will determine my next birth. Whether that birth is a rebirth of anger, a rebirth of love, a rebirth of affection, karma works out splendidly that way. And neuroscientifically, that seems to work out as well because the brain fires off neurons. It puts out chemicals, which there's a bioelectric chemical discharge which produces energy, which motivates us to do something. You create the same chemicals over and over and over again, you've created the karma to do something over and over and over again. And the cause and effect of that in the physical realm is because I have made all these decisions in the past. That's why I am who I am and where I am at this moment. It's that tidal wave of past experience pushing me forward. But I can get out of the way.
I've often wondered, when I go into a meditation and I lose consciousness of my body, at first I was afraid to do that because I was afraid I wouldn't get back. But then when I let go, I always pop back into the same body. And for a while I was wondering why my consciousness is so preoccupied with this one particular body. And now I'm wondering from what you said, is it more a matter of that, like the mind is popping into different bodies or simultaneously in all different bodies at the same time, but that my awareness or what I consider to be a personal consciousness is actually an attribute of this particular body?
In esoteric Buddhism, also known as Vajrayana and Tantra, there are teachings that presume the one mind idea. And interestingly enough, Aleister Crowley of the Ordo Templi Orientis also advocated this idea, is that everything is happening right here, right now, at this point. It's all a figment of this fantastic imagination, which includes one mind, but many, 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 many manifestations of it, an infinite number of manifestations. So if I die, my illusory body, the skin bag, goes away, mine pops up someplace else, put there because of my karmic experience. It's not that I die. The body dies, therefore this personality goes with it. And then it manifests somewhere else as somebody else, depending upon that karma. And rebirth is not necessarily linear into the future. You can pop up anywhere because it's all one in emptiness. So yeah, it could be that your mind is popping in and out of different places. That is possible. When I lose my body and self, I'm always, it's a drag coming back. Because I'm looking at myself going, damn, I don't look like Sean Connery. I rather would. I don't want to pop into this body, but it's the only body I got in this lifetime right now. The body I have tomorrow, who knows? Who can tell? That's why we can say on all levels, not just the quantum physics level, not just the three characteristics of the universe, change being one of them, stress the other, and emptiness or not self, the third, is that it is so unstable because my capacity to experience is also unstable.
Since the mind is so unstable, where should one keep this attention to keep the mind sound? Is there such a technique or such a thing that one can control and keep the mind free from associations or judgments or anything, where my attention moment to moment have to stay in order for mind not to wander anywhere?
There are numerous techniques to help along the way. Normally, actually, it's a process. It's a learning process. The Buddha himself described it as it's like you're walking out to the sea. You start on the shore, you get your toes wet, you take a step, you go a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, and the water keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and suddenly you walk off to the continental shelf, the edge of and you're down. You're there. And that's how the process of being on the path to enlightenment works, step by step. And the techniques are also step by step. One of the great techniques that I used to use, and a few other people, a few students of mine have used, is set a timer. Every half hour it goes off and you stop and go, what is this? What's going on now? What is this now? What am I thinking? And this is one technique. Another technique is walking, and this is a really nice one. I'll give you an example of it. Walking meditation. I used to do walking meditation in the alleys in Evanston, Illinois, and not Texas. Evanston, Illinois. And what I would do is I'd look at a trash can or a light pole at the other end of the alley, and I would walk slowly, never taking my eyes off of it. Suddenly I noticed I'm not moving. It's the world going past me. That was the sensory experience that I had. And that seemed more real than me walking to it. But that kept me mindful of where I was, what I was doing, and what was on my mind. Between the timer and that kind of walking meditation is great. Mindfulness practice, as we do it in the United States, I'm kind of dubious of its effectivity. Mindfulness as it's taught in the Pali Canon, fantastic, but it's very involved because there's like 15 different things you're supposed to be mindful of. You can go from one to the other, and then over time you become mindful of them all at one time, which is a great technique. If you're looking at quality of mind, the thoughts themselves, the breath, which actually the only three physical realities which we can have: tactile sensation, thought, and quality of thought. That's real. The thought itself may not be. The content of the emotional quality may not be real, but the thought and the quality are real because they affect our karma. That kind of mindfulness training is good. But again, it takes time. You have to become good at it, skilled at it, just like you become skilled at any kind of training. You don't become a pianist overnight. You don't become a great meditator overnight. You can live mindfully. This is a great contraption. It's called a mala, a string of beads, in this case, discs, and just rubbing it and being aware that you're rubbing it. The object of mindfulness techniques is to get the ego out of the way. Again, going back to Pure Land Buddhism, there's two powers. Self-power, the power of the ego, and there's the other power, the power of non-ego. When my ego gets in the way, I lose track of what I'm doing. When I'm not deliberately paying attention to my ego, other power takes over. I'm a much happier camper. I don't make nearly as many bad decisions as I do as when my ego gets in the way. And mindfulness of the arising of a conception of self as it arises is an excellent technique to develop that kind of mindfulness.